In the heart of medieval Europe, within the cold, damp walls of castles, town halls, and monasteries converted into prisons, an often ignored chapter in the history of justice was played out: the imprisonment of women. More than places of correction, these prisons were instruments of social and moral control, where women were punished not only for what they had done, but for what they represented. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you like these videos and leave a like. Now let's start. Imagine being dragged through heavy iron doors. Flickering torches illuminate a corridor filled with the desperate cries of the condemned. For many women imprisoned in medieval Europe, this was not a vision from legend, but the very beginning of a nightmare. To enter a medieval prison, called a jail in England or a geôle in France, was to immediately lose one's identity, often quite literally. One of the earliest practices documented in many prisons was the shaving of one's head. It was not just a hygienic measure, it was a symbolic gesture. Hair in medieval culture represented dignity, modesty, and femininity for women. Depriving a prisoner of it meant degrading her, subjugating her, breaking her. Then came the chains. Whether guilty or merely suspected, women were often shackled with heavy irons. 13th century records in York and London include references to prisoners being locked in bilboes, iron leg irons, or even chained to cell walls. Prisons, rather than justice structures, were often wings of castles, basements of monasteries, or rooms in town halls. Damp, cold, and dark environments shared with thieves, debtors, and criminals of all kinds. Cells exclusively for women were very rare before the 15th century. German jurist Ulrich Tengler wrote in his Der Laienspiegel, "Let them be confined and humiliated." For women, detention was not a form of correction, but a strategy of social erasure. Not all medieval torture involved whips or cruel instruments. Some killed slowly, silently. Deep beneath the official prisons were the hunger chambers. Windowless, barely larger than a coffin, these cells housed women left without light, heat, or food. In France, in the 14th century, they were called oubliettes, literally places of oblivion. Prisoners were lowered through trapdoors and often never recovered. Some oubliettes were dug directly into the rock of castles, such as at Loches or the Bastille. Once the trapdoor was closed, no light filtered through. Officially, starvation was not a punishment, but in practice, starvation became a common punishment, especially for those accused of witchcraft or immorality. English prison records record women being kept without bread or water for days. Conditions accelerated the agony. Without hygiene, warmth, or nourishment, even the strongest bodies quickly gave out. Prisoners lived in their own excrement, plagued by lice, sores, and infections. Death came from dehydration, malnutrition, or septicemia. But often, even before the body gave out, it was the mind that broke. The screams of some women echoed for days, then fell silent. And with them, the very memory of their existence vanished. Names not recorded, bodies buried anonymously outside the walls. The starvation cell wasn't just a punishment, it was a slow, deliberate erasure. Sin engraved on the skin, punishment and branding for immorality. In the Middle Ages, the concept of crime was deeply intertwined with religion and morality. For a woman, an accusation of adultery, disobedience, or immoral conduct was enough to suffer devastating punishments. One of the most long-lasting was branding. In England, as early as the 13th century, women accused of vices could be branded with letters carved into their flesh, such as the V for vagrant. Suspected prostitutes, or women known as night walkers, were permanently branded, often on the chest or shoulder. Similar practices are found in court records in London, York, and Scotland under the Act of Parliament of 1424. Bridewell Palace, converted into a prison by Edward VI in 1533, documents public floggings and brandings of women accused of prostitution. Branding not only inflicted physical pain, it was an eternal condemnation, an indelible mark visible to all. Fortescue wrote in De Laudibus Legum Angliae, "The correction of sin is visible to all, so that others may fear." It was a punishment that outlived the punishment itself, preventing a woman from reintegrating into society. Her skin told her past, erasing any possibility of redemption. Long before they were burned at the stake, many women accused of witchcraft had already been tortured in captivity. In Germany, Italy, Switzerland, and France, instruments such as the strappado were used, in which the woman was lifted by her arms, tied behind her back, then dropped, or the boot, which slowly shattered the legs with wooden or iron wedges. Confessions were not just expected, they were constructed. Women, to escape the pain, named names, creating chains of accusations. In cities like Würzburg, between 1626 and 1631, over 150 women were executed in an epidemic of panic and torture. The cell became the real court. The verdict was already decided before it was even pronounced. Medieval prisons were not only places of detention, but powerful tools of control, intimidation, and social erasure, especially for women. Through deprivation of liberty, public humiliation, torture, and starvation, the prison system reflected society's deep fears of female transgression, often identified more with sin than with crime. Guilt, in many cases, did not have to be proven. It was enough to be a woman, poor, alone, or simply accused. The suffering inflicted was not aimed at rehabilitation, but at breaking the identity, making the victims invisible and forgotten. Today, rereading these stories means not only bringing to light lives buried in the silence of the dungeons, but also questioning the long path of justice and the residues of that punitive power that still in different forms can strike those who are most vulnerable. Remembering is an act of resistance, and these voices, suffocated for too long, finally deserve to be heard. That's all for today. And what do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. If you like these videos, you help us support the channel with a small gesture. See you next time. Bye.